There's one item of clothing that I've changed between the last two videos, or this video and last video. See if you can tell what it is. Okay. The last lecture we had, or it's actually tomorrow's lecture that I did first. Today's lecture, Monday's lecture, is on Augustus. Couple things here. I did convert a student's slideshow, took their slideshow and made it my own a little bit, took some things out, put a few small things in. Okay, as we look at this, I want you to just check some stuff out. Now this first slide is the activity sheet. I'm gonna go beyond that and go to this one. So this is a converted slideshow. You will see several things here. Okay, my additions are going to be clearly marked, but pay attention to the thesis, the depth of research the student did, timeline, citation sources. This student did a great job of in-text citation, so I really like this one. Now, the main points we're looking at in this slideshow are going to be how Augustus established that system that went to the Pax Romana. And really what I want to look at is that perception versus reality. Okay, he's not a king, but an emperor. He's modest, but a god. And he's seen as restoring Rome, but he creates an entirely new government. And if we go back one slide, there's a word that I want you to look at is dichotomy. And that will come up later in the lecture. Don't panic about it yet. Okay, so Augustus Caesar. Look at me. I'm right there. Let's go here. Okay. The question this student came up with was, what was his everyday life like? Actually took that out. This student also did the state standards. Now, these are slightly different because this is an older presentation, and they changed the state standards in 2019. So don't worry about this, but 4 is going to be history, 1 is going to be civics, 2 is going to be economics, I believe, yep, and 3 is geography. The thesis was Augustus Caesar was a great and helpful emperor who cared about his people because he added much to new territory, made a lot of new laws, and helped his people, and he ended Julius Caesar's dictatorship, ended the Civil War, and during his reign restored peace. Okay. Quite a bit in that thesis, and I'm not sure if everything's going to be totally accurate. Not worried about the thesis on this presentation, though. We'll go over some of the things later on. How was his life impacted when Julius Caesar died? Okay, in the last lecture I gave you, we talked about how Octavian was over in Greece when Julius Caesar died, and his mom said, "Be the man, come back and act." And he returned to Rome, got a hold of Julius Caesar's troops, and marched on Rome. We also covered a lot of the story about when he took or killed Mark Antony and Cleopatra, and we left off when he came in, I think, 27 BCE, and he insisted that the Senate would take back his the power that he had over that time frame. He did impact Rome because he changed Rome's government entirely, and he became known as the Principus Civitatis, I believe it is in Latin, where he is the first citizen. Okay, he wasn't a dictator. He didn't petition the Senate to take on or to allow him to use the word king or rex in the provinces, but he did say, "Give me the title of principal citizen." There was an office of principal senator in the Republic, but it didn't really have much power. Augustus took that and actually gave himself power. He had the right to veto everything. Everything had to be passed through him. He could create his own laws. And there are some other things that they did too. We'll get to that. Oh, down here you can see history Augustus, no date. That is in-text citation. And at the end of the presentation, we should be able to find that site in her or his references. Okay, what laws did he establish? Augustus is amazing. I really see him as a dichotomy, kind of a split between two things that seem opposites. He one thing that's not an opposite. He does encourage the Romans to start having kids. The laws really focus on producing offspring, and so the more kids you have, the better tax breaks you get. Same thing we have in the United States. Okay, the more kids you have, the greater tax breaks you get. There are some countries like China that would limit your families and make sure you didn't have very many kids, and you actually get penalized the more kids you had. And then you had to be married. If your husband or wife died, you had to get remarried quickly. Otherwise, you get taxed heavily. Um, he didn't want anyone to go through life without producing kids. Okay, he also made divorce laws very strict. Again, you see down the bottom there that in-text citation. And you had to marry someone. I didn't know this. Someone in your social class. Okay, when we looked at the plebeians, and we didn't talk about it very much, but the plebeians actually petitioned to have the right to marry people outside their social classes. The plebeians were seen as a lower class group, and they did win that right. Okay, and not so worried about the benefits the people get, but he did want people to participate. Okay, he is viewed as a great emperor. I love that quote where he founded Rome, a city of bricks, and he left it a city of marble. If you've ever been to Rome, this is kind of an interesting picture here on the bottom he has. Rome is a marble city, or looks like it is. Okay, this building down here, this is the Capitol in Rome. It was built by a guy named Mussolini. The Romans call it the wedding cake. And Mussolini is very fascinating because he built this very close to the old Roman Forum. And he wanted to regain that heredity of Rome. And so he built this kind of in the Roman fashion, but he destroyed Roman artifacts to build a lot of the new Rome that he wanted to have. So he's a dichotomy in himself. What influence did he have over the expansion? Again, we talked about this in the last few lectures, and we do see Rome, that empire, expand quite a bit. We had Spain, we had Egypt. He moves into Central Europe, and it just grows quite a bit. All the way up to the Rhine. And there he has some more. Not so worried about that. There's Mark Antony, the guy that he destroyed or killed. Now, not Mark Antony, but Octavian was a fascinating guy. His wife, Livia, too bad we can't get into Livia, don't have enough time, but she was actually one of his 3 or 4 primary advisors, and he married her later on. I think she was his second wife, and I don't believe they had any children. But Livia, was the wife of one of his friends, and he essentially asked his friend to divorce her so he could marry her, and his friend did it. But she kind of works behind the scenes, and so if you're looking at powerful women in Rome, Livia, his wife right there, is a fascinating one to look at. Now, down in the island of Capri. Capri is a beautiful island that is right across the Bay of Naples from Naples. It's right off the tip of Sorrento. And it is, or was, the emperor's private island. In fact, Tiberius, he lived there for a while, and he was kind of a sick guy, kind of morally decrepit. But Augustus had his palace down there. And the quotes are a little bit different. There's one quote that I found, the city of bricks and not the city of marble. There's another one. There it is. She had it right. Have I played the part well? Then applaud as I exit. That's what his final words are said to have been. Now, here is some of the things I want to talk about on the dichotomy of Augustus. One thing he did is he deified himself. And to do that, he made Caesar a god. Julius Caesar. And there was, early in Augustus' reign, Halley's Comet flew by, and he said, look, that is Caesar's soul ascending to heaven. And so that made Caesar a god. Now, even though Augustus was seen as a god, he loved to create the impression that he was very humble living. He'd only eat rough bread and cheese. he lived in a very small room. It's called a cell. It's similar to what a monk might live in. Didn't have a lot of creature comforts. But he was also the Pontifex Maximus, and that is what we call the Pope, the chief bridge builder. Pont means bridge, Maximus is the head, and so Pontifex Maximus is the chief bridge builder. And so this humbleness contrasted with being that chief religious officer. A lot of times in our Judeo-Christian, it depends on which sect you're from, you will have some priests and pastors who do live very humbly and simply. But then you'll also have some that live in great wealth. It's fascinating when I go to Catholic churches, they're opulent, they have a lot of wealth. And the bishops and the priests and the popes and all these people who take a vow of poverty often have these great gems on themselves. And it's fascinating to see that dichotomy as well. Now, in 27 BCE, Augustus made a show of going to the Senate and saying, okay, here's all the power, I'm done. Washes his hands, you guys have the power back, I'm going back to live my simple life. Kind of like that dictator Cincinnatus, where he was a dictator for 15 days and then brought the power back. In this situation, though, the Senate begged. They said, no, we need you. Augustus, please stay. And so he said, okay, I'll stay, but I'm not a dictator. I'm not a king. I am the first citizen. The Principes Civitatis, or Princeps Civitatis. And so he, with that title, was able to create his own laws, veto any legislation that he wanted to, and also being the head of religion, he was able to kind of guide the morals of the Roman people. So the more I look at Augustus, the more of these dichotomies I see. He is humble, but has all the power. There are stories about him and his daughter Julia, who was not a very good girl. And in fact, later in her life, he annexed her or banned her to an island out in the Mediterranean Sea and didn't allow her to see anybody. That island's fascinating. I'd like to go there someday because that island had no water, but he made engineers create a water catching system. Another story. Don't worry about it. I really like this person's comparison. I'm not going to worry about it too much though. But they look at Shah Jahan and the emperor here. Get off there, make sure. Yep. Oh, come on, let's go. And here is the timeline that our student put together, and it's appropriate. Looks at the reference or at the timeline there, Augustus. References. These references are done in alphabetical order, which is what you should have them done as. I don't generally grade looking at the references to be in alphabetical order, but I appreciate this. And I did put my references down at the end. I changed the formatting too to fit my references on that last page. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. Love to hear from you. And when we look at the task for this day, it is define the word dichotomy. Okay, give me an example from your life. What have you seen that is a dichotomy? Two opposites that seem to be housed in the same thing. Okay, talk to you later. Enjoy the day.